So the context for leadership is absolutely critical to understand how to approach leadership and leadership development in your school. And it can be summed up quite elegantly by Ronald Heifetz, or it was summed up quite elegantly by Ronald Heifetz from the Harvard Business School. And he made a distinction between technical versus adaptive leadership challenges and leadership and styles of leadership. And it starts with, if we just start from the premise that the context we're working in today's modern world for all educators is what the military calls a VUCA environment. I know many of you will probably be already familiar with the term, but if not, VUCA, it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And it's a military term when you go into a battlefield, for instance, and everything's happening all around you and you don't know what's going on. It's a VUCA environment, and it requires different decision-making, different strategies, different approaches, different forms of leadership in a VUCA environment. And as Ronald Heifetz pointed, and his colleagues pointed out, that you can have a technical issue. If a technical issue, you're faced with a technical issue, then you need a technical response, and a technical leadership will do. Now, what constitutes a technical problem? Well, it's a problem that can be defined, that's by someone who has expert knowledge. And because it can be defined, it can be diagnosed, it can be analyzed, and depending upon your level of expertise, you can come up with a solution, an expert solution. And some solutions are better than others. So the more expertise you have, the better your solution, and it becomes simply a matter of implementation or execution. Follow the action plan and, quote unquote, fix the problem. And all of that is exactly how it needs to go when it is a technical issue. However, in a VUCA environment, in a context for leadership that is complex, the issue is not technical, the issue is adaptive. We have adaptive challenges in play. There is no fix, for instance, for people of different ethnic groups, different religions, different backgrounds, having fundamentally different points of view. There's no technical fix for this. One needs to recognize that that is now our community, and we need to adapt to where it's not just a singular viewpoint or just not a narrow bandwidth of people who share similar views. You are going to have conflicting views. You are going to have a lot of misunderstandings, and that's the way it is. So you have to adapt, and that's a different form of leadership now. It's a form of leadership that requires, it's literally is adaptive leadership. How do you lead so that people evolve, they grow, they become conscious, they remain connected, and we have to emerge our way forward into a desirable future because there's no technical answer for this thing. Now, as Ronald Heifetz and his colleagues pointed out, if you misdiagnose the situation, you think that this is a technical issue and you come up with a technical response when in fact it's adaptive because it's a complex environment. By definition, the technical fixes will not only fail, but they can even make the problems worse. Now, on the flip side, if it's an adaptive issue, then you need to come up with an adaptive response, which means conversations, communication, upgrading between the ears, learning how to evolve together, learning how to see things differently, learning how to understand different perspectives and harness them into emerge a new way forward based on dialogue so that we can come up with a perspective none of us have ever had before until we had the conversations. Collaboration becomes very critical. Power struggles don't work in an adaptive environment. They just make things worse. But on the flip side to that, by the way, just to be fair, if you have an adaptive approach where we need to talk things through and work it out, etc., when in fact it's a technical issue, all you're doing is delaying what needs to be done. And it's like, in this particular case, if it's an actual technical issue, then somebody come up with a solution and literally do fix it. Someone just get on with it and correct the issue. No need for general consensus around the table. Someone deal with it. However, we're talking in our context here, leadership in a complex environment, a context where it is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And now we need an adaptive response, and we need adaptive leadership development approaches. Hence why we take a platypi approach, which is adaptive. It's tailored. It's unique to your specific conditions and circumstances. It's not one size fits all. There are some general principles, but how those principles apply is totally dependent upon your unique conditions and challenges.
Is this where heuristics rule?
Yeah, absolutely. This is where general rules of thumb for discovery, and you can learn these heuristics for leadership heuristics. But yes, it's not formulas, not technical formulas, but adaptive heuristics.
Look, it strikes me that the realm of adaptive leadership, where that's what's required, that's where a few things around, quite a few things around the inner generative work becomes important, because there's a whole set of beliefs and capabilities that you need to have to do the adaptive. It's a damn sight easier once you're trained to go to the manual and go, this problem requires this fix technical. But when you're doing adaptive, there's so many other shifting things there that there isn't a clear, if you do this, that's what will happen. So you've got to have perhaps a heightened sense of acuity around gathering the information, first of all, that's relevant, because it's not as clear as a technical issue generally, or it's not as easy to find, perhaps. And you've also got to have, in some cases, room for intuitive thinking, not just here's the facts, let's rock. And you can't treat it like a formula. And so then sometimes the best adaptive leadership has got a big chunk of intuition somewhere that started the finding of the solution. And then the other thing is, for it to be successful, you don't go, oh, adaptive, got a solution, great, and now we've got the formula for it and we rock on, we ride, because it's not, because you might solve the problem now and it might be only a week later where you have to adapt again. And that's where you've got to have this some sense of data, of accurate information, and tracking your environment and what's happening to be able to be adaptive, because otherwise it becomes very much open to hearsay and the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so you can end up coming up with a great adaptive solution to a problem that wasn't really actually the problem.